The final arc for the Great Pretenders here, all 9 episodes are going to focus on one arc. I thought they were going to break the 9 episodes into 2 arcs, like 2 different stories. Maybe we had like the Lawrence story and then the final story that kind of takes everyone and combines it all together. But instead we got the Wizard of Far East, which kind of takes place taking like the Makoto elements, like the unfinished Makoto stuff, and it gels the Lawrence stuff and just kind of combines them together. But don't misunderstand, it's not like they're 2 separate stories running concurrently. Their lives are like so intertwined. It's almost like destiny. It's poetry is what I'd say. It's poetry. Their lives are so perfectly intertwined through his dad that this final arc kind of makes everything make sense. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's kind of like quickly recap the Wizard of Far East, just in case you don't remember what happened. So our main character, Laurent, and I guess our other main character, Makoto, they kind of have another falling out again. Since they did that for like every single other arc, I guess they wanted to start the final arc in the exact same way. He leaves, and then he joins this company at Laurent's, request, or rather his recommendation. And it turns out that company is actually in the process of buying and selling children. They do human trafficking for God knows what. I mean, other than money, of course. And then once they get their money, Makoto's like, this is wrong, this is immoral, I need to shut this thing down. So what's the con? Alright, the con is simple. We're gonna have Abigail pretend to be a Saudi princess. We capture Abigail, we then sell her to Suzaku, which is the main villain of this arc. Suzaku buys Abigail, and then we have our insider man Makoto, which we have inserted previously into this group to then break Abigail out, and then we're gonna make out like bandits. But at the final moment, at the absolute final moment, Makoto gets cold feet. Well, kinda. He wants to rescue the children that are captured as well, and because he wants to rescue the children, it kind of puts a halt on their entire plan. And then things are made a little bit more complicated when his dad shows up, and his dad's last name is Ozaki. This is going to be important later. So once his dad shows up, his dad's like, oh man, I'm so sorry, I had to leave you and your mom, man, I'm not a deadbeat dad. Our main character buys it hook, line, and sinker, and then he gets betrayed by his dad. And during the betrayal, like, this was such a juicy betrayal. I love this betrayal. I could feel the sting of betrayal in the voice acting. And our main character watches as his dad kills Abigail and Cynthia, and then he's just like, this can't be happening, and then he shoots his dad, and it's all well and good. Like, I liked that scene. But then in the back of my mind, right, I thought to myself, there's no way, right? There's no way Abigail's dead. There's no way Cynthia's dead. Maybe his dad is actually dead, but there's no way Cynthia and Abigail are dead. So of course not, they're not dead. It was all part of Laurent's grand plan. His dad has actually been working with Laurent the whole time. And I get that it's like a con artist thing, and I get that that's like the whole point of this story, but it just kind of hurts because Makoto's super naive, right? Like, that's the biggest problem I had with all the other cons, is Makoto's not really a con man. He's the one who gets conned. He's not really selling anything. It's so weird that people even believe him in the first place, and he's just so naive. Like, I'm just waiting for the moment where everything just kind of hits a wall, and then he has to come to terms with the terrible mistakes he's made throughout his life. Like, Abigail dying and Cynthia dying, that was his fault. In that scene, because he confided in his dad, because he broke script, everything went wrong, because he did those things. And that was some really good character development, but it's kind of cheapened by the fact that, like, oh, your keikaku was actually part of my keikaku, and don't worry, I have everything covered. How can I explain this? I'm torn. I'm just super torn. There's a part of me that's like, yeah, Abigail, my waifu, is not dead. And there's another part of me that's like, damn, we missed out on some great character development. I would have liked to see like how this story would have proceeded if Makoto had to come to terms with his own mistakes. But instead, he kind of gets caught, like his fall gets softened by Laurent and everyone else kind of catching him. And I did find it strange that they did not explain how his dad survived getting shot in the chest by a gun. I guess you could say maybe the gun fired a blank and he had like a blood pack on him or something. But like in all the other cases, and all the cases leading up to this, they spent so much time explaining exactly how things were going to go down and how they're going to trick people. Because the whole point of the show is to sell the con, right? You're not selling the con to just the villains. You're selling the con to us, the viewers. If we, the viewers, can buy the con, then we're going to like the show even more. So some of the latter episodes, some of the previous episodes, they had some problems because I didn't really buy the con. Like I thought the con was like a little stupid, but it's fine, right? You know, it's, you can't have everything your way. You can't have your cake and eat it. There's essentially a magic system at work. It's like a spy level magic system. Like a spy movie has a magic system, right? They put on a mask and then people somehow believe that this person is another person. You just got to be able to believe the magic system, and it's more apparent in this final arc. In this final arc, you could totally believe that there's some kind of con magic system going on that's not really based upon real life. But you know, once again, this is anime, and you're definitely fair. Your argument is definitely fair. You're like, Roion, what do you expect? This is anime. This is an anime about conning people, and they've already done shit like this in the previous arcs. So why are you so torn now? I'm just so torn now because this could have had huge ramifications for our main character Makoto, but it kind of just gets reversed and his character development stays, but it didn't really have any consequences. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked like usual. Let's get back to the plot. So Makoto shoots his dad. Boom. Makoto's dad is not dead, but he thinks he's dead. And Makoto's super, broken up about it. So Suzaku, the main villain, she spends time nursing Makoto back to full health. And it's at this point that the show tries really hard to get us to care about Akemi Suzaku, the main villain of this arc. I definitely found this bit weird, like them trying to get us to care about Suzaku, because in every other arc before this, they got us to hate the villain as much as possible so you don't feel bad about the con happening, right? James Coleman, horrible person, he felt up our waifu Abigail, and that is absolutely unacceptable. We had Sam Ibrahim, he did, slay a thought, which is cool, but at the end of the day, he was match fixing and he did kill a really cool guy. And then you have Eddie Castano. I don't exactly remember why he was evil other than the fact that he was selling drugs in our community, which is pretty bad, granted. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like every other villain was super evil, but for some reason Suzaku here, who is dealing in like human trafficking, child, stuff like that's going on. We're supposed to really hate her, but for some reason the show tries really hard for us not to hate her. I personally thought this was going to lead towards some kind of redemption arc where she like joins our main character and does something stupid, where our main character is going to do something stupid and naive that we can count on, and then she's going to like swoop in and like catch his fall because someone's got to pick up Makoto's mess. But instead, the plot takes kind of a poetic turn, if you know what I mean. So it's essentially the first half of this entire arc was kind of like a retelling of what happened to Laurent, because Laurent's team, like before Cynthia, before Abigail, Laurent had another team where he was kind of the junior, and this is kind of his backstory. And Laurent was actually mentored by Makoto's dad, Seiji Ozaki, and because his last name is Ozaki, if you take the OZ, it's like Wizard of Oz. That's why it's like the Wizard of Far East, because he's the Wizard of Oz, but in the Far East. So Ozaki is also called the Wizard precisely because he is so good at pulling off these amazing cons. He comes up with these insane plans and tricks evil people out of billions of dollars. He's like a modern day Robin Hood that kind of keeps all the money for himself. And he does this with this new character, Dorothy, which is a top tier waifu, and of course Kim, but except for this time she is younger than when Makoto meets her. So who's the odd woman out? It has to be Dorothy, right? Dorothy, you don't know who she is. She just kind of pops up in this flashback and we found out the past of what happened, and Dorothy dies. Dorothy dies because of a newspaper, like something in the world just kind of happens and it screws up their plan. Their plan was essentially to have Dorothy pretend to be a princess, but this time instead of like the Middle East, they chose Ethiopia, and Ethiopia princess kind of like appeared in the news, and that just kind of ruined their plans, and because of that, they killed, they killed Dorothy. And Dorothy was engaged to our main character, Laurent, at this point, and this is kind of where the sad story ends, and this kind of explains why Makoto's dad ended up going to jail. If he's such a successful con man, how did things go so wrong? It's because of things outside of their control. It's because the Ethiopian government, or rather the Ethiopian princess, showed up, and it kind of threw everything out of whack. And because of that, Makoto's dad needed to protect Makoto, right? And his mom. And to do that, he went to prison to protect them, to make sure he had no contact with his family. So this entire arc is essentially just a retelling of what happened to Laurent, and our main character Makoto kind of grows and learns by suffering the same fate as Laurent did, but this time I'd say like the Laurent one, it wasn't his fault, right? We can all agree that Laurent kind of got screwed over by fate and destiny and plot stuff, whereas Makoto, his mistakes are kind of his own. He's very naive and he's like a good person at heart, and because of that, he keeps trying to go for more, and because he keeps trying to go for more, he ultimately kind of gets Abigail and Cynthia killed, even though it was all part of Lauren's big plan, and Lauren kind of like went down and scooped them up, like catching Makoto's fall. And this is kind of where we get like introduced to like Shanghai, and Shanghai is this rival. I wouldn't say rival, they're technically like a subsidiary of Suzaku's like group, and they're like the Chinese portion of her human trafficking plan and stuff. And because they're the Chinese portion of the human trafficking plan, they need interpreters. And there's this really good scene. This is like, I think, my favorite scene in Great Pretender. It's the one where the main villain from the Chinese group, the Shanghai group, Liu Xiao, if I remember his name correctly, he talks about translations. He talks about this Japanese author who could have won the Nobel Prize for literature, but he lost because his translation wasn't as good. And that's why he talks about the importance of translation. And if you take this in the context of you watching an anime and you reading the subtitles, you're not kind of experiencing the original source material. He's right. You're experiencing what the translator's interpretation of said source material is. We're relying so heavily on the translator, and if you're watching the dub, not only are you relying on the translator and the localization team, you're also relying on the voice actors. Do they do the delivery right? Are they hitting the same beats as those characters? Otherwise, you might be getting a somewhat different experience than the one you should be getting. I especially liked that specific monologue because it's like he's talking to us, the viewer, at the same time he's talking to the other guy in the room as well, like the stupid lackey person. He's talking to Chen Yao, I think his name was. He's talking to that guy, but he's also talking to us, the viewer, at the same time, because he's talking about translations and watching, or rather picking up other forms of media and like understanding the kind of language barrier gap. And from this point onwards, language kind of becomes a huge theme. I mean, it was already kind of like a huge theme of this show because, you know, they travel around and our main character has to learn all these different languages, but it's kind of like a backseat. It's not something really that important. It's like it's part of the series, it's part of the flair and the appeal of the series, but it's not like a core tenet of the show. And I like that they expand upon it, and they do make it a core part of the show in the final arc where they have language play a key piece. Because before this, language was kind of like this funny thing where they were doing, like they were experiencing other cultures and speaking other languages, but it wasn't really that important. It was kind of like window dressing to really put you in that world. From there, we have a new plan. This is Oz's plan, the Wizard of Far East. Okay, so his plan is essentially to have Makoto become really close to Suzaku, and Makoto will become Suzaku's interpreter, and then Laurent, who is close to Liu Xiao from the previously failed Dorothy death plan, because that failed, he's still in Liu Xiao's like good books because they never made out like bandits. He's still part of Liu Xiao's like inner circle, and because he's part of Liu's inner circle, he's able to pick up his position again and act as interpreter for him. And because they're like the key interpreters for both sides, all they have to do is control the situation, control the conversation, move it in the direction they want, and then boom, they can control where they're going to meet, what's going to happen, where and when, like all the details. They control essentially everything. At that point, they had pretty much won. But on like a side note, if the villains hired any other interpreter, if they brought in like any other person that speaks another language with them, it would have been so easy. It would have been super easy to see through the entire con. Not to mention the fact that it's funny because Liu, the Shanghai people, were actually ready to accept Suzaku's deal. It seemed to me that Liu was actually ready to accept Tokyo and bend the knee, but then obviously Laurent and Makoto kind of got in the way of that. So here's the final plan. What they're going to do is they're going to lure Suzaku and Liu into the same room together. And once they're in the same room together, they're going to bust in pretending to be cops and then steal the money and then get out and then kind of leave them stranded. Because unbeknownst to them, they're actually on a deserted island on a set that's made to look just like Suzaku's office, and they would have gone away with it if it weren't for Makoto doing a double cross. So Makoto's plan is essentially, he's like tired of being played by Laurent, right? Because he got played by Laurent, turns out his dad's still alive, turns out Abigail's still alive, turns out Cynthia's still alive, and none of his mistakes actually mattered that much, and he kind of feels burned by that, you know? Even though everyone came out fine, he still feels kind of burned. Even though it was his mistake, he still kind of feels burned because of all the other times he's gone burned in all the other arcs, right? He's tired of getting played by Laurent, so he's gonna play Laurent this time. and his plan involves getting the villains from the other arcs. And that's honestly what I did not like about his plan. I was fine with it. Like, I'm fine with playing Lauren. I'm fine with having your 4D chess plan to supplant the other plan, but I did not like that he involved the villains from the other arcs. And let's not forget, it's not like his plan. It's not like Makoto's plan to beat Lawrence and Oz's plan. It's not like his plan was any better. They still escaped with the same amount of money, and they left with the exact same things they went to get. If Makoto didn't do a stupid double cross, they essentially would have gone away with the same things. The only difference Makoto's plan made to the Lawrence and Oz plan is that it kind of helps Suzaku's family situation. Like, he helps Suzaku out to kind of close the gap with her son. But other than that, it's essentially the same thing. And then the other villains show up, and the other villains are like, oh, I'm a good guy now. Like, I've turned over a new leaf. I do legitimate business now. And I thought that was like absolutely ridiculous. I can buy Lauren's group making an entire high rise in the middle of nowhere to fool Suzaku. You know what? I can buy that. But what I can't buy is the fact that the villains show up and then suddenly they've like turned over a new leaf. That they're suddenly good guys now and they won't trick people ever again. To me, it felt like it was heavily implied that like Abby had to sleep with Coleman in order to get him to trust her. So that felt like a little awkward for me. Like, it just feels so weird to kind of see these villains here and like having a new leaf turned over. Like, that's really my biggest pet peeve with this ending, is the fact that, okay, Makoto, your plan added monetarily pretty much nothing. It like helps Suzaku out, and I get that the show made us care about Suzaku, but let's not forget that she is allowing kind of child and human trafficking to happen in her company. So I don't care how much of a nice old lady she is when she does human trafficking. Like, that doesn't make sense. That does not absolve her, okay? That does not absolve her of the evil she's doing. And somehow we're supposed to just care about these people. Like Makoto, like, all you did was help out this woman that does human trafficking. Like, your plan sucked. I'm sorry, Makoto. Your plan was awful. Lauren's plan was way better. I mean, Makoto, you got him, right? That was your plan. Your plan was like fool Lawrence. You got him. You fooled him. But at the end of the day, like, what did it add? This is like winning the game but losing the match, if you will. This is like winning your lane and then losing the game. Win lane, lose game. Win game, lose match. It's all the same thing. You definitely surprised Lauren. I'll give you that. Lauren was definitely surprised. But at the end of the day, did bringing Eddie Casano and the other guys into this, did it really matter? Did it really add anything? I don't think so. In fact, I think it makes it worse. And then from here, things take like a weird turn. Okay, let's talk specifically about like this epilogue. So in the epilogue, we have Cynthia talking to this new guy called Kawain, I believe. And because she's talking to Kawain like they know each other for a very long time, I thought there was like a time skip and she adopted one of the orphans. But I believe this is like a new character that Cynthia's been hiding. Like, they're setting up the Cynthia arc for next season. Maybe it'll involve this kid, Kawain. Maybe they know Kawain for a long time. I don't know exactly how Kawain fits into this, but you can pretty much call it for what it is. It's sequel bait for a potential season 2 if they ever make a season 2. And then we get the sequel bait for Makoto's story, and it's essentially intertwining Makoto and Abigail, just as we wanted, shipper bros. We are taking Abigail and Makoto and kind of putting them together, as Makoto comments on how good Abigail looks with short hair and, you know, how it suits her better. Yes, Makoto, you are a man of integrity just like me. From there, we're then shown what's Lauren doing. Lauren is actually going to con the next president. He's there at the inauguration and he's going to con the next president. That's essentially setting up what Lauren's going to do. He's going to con the president. But then after the credits, we're shown Dorothy. And then Dorothy talks about all her past cons. She has amnesia and she keeps remembering bits of what she's done, but she remembers the roles she's been playing in those cons. And if you notice what she's talking about cons in the order that she did them. So she's slowly remembering things to the point where she got shot by Liu and kind of left for dead in the ocean. Essentially implying that she's like slowly remembering who she is, and then somehow the engagement ring that our boy Lawrence got her finds its way through a fish back to her through her adopted new Chinese parents that kind of are fishermen and caught the fish and got the ring and gave it to her, and she puts it on her ring finger, and it's like heavily implied that she's like slowly remembering what happened to her. And then the show essentially ends there. After we find out Dorothy's alive, the show ends. And let's talk about the ending. I think, like, I'm just torn. I'm just so torn again because if you think about it, if you ignore this epilogue, this ending was good because it closes everything. It gets rid of the Oz, it gets rid of Ozaki, it gets rid of Makoto's dad being like this subplot thing about Makoto. It ties up Makoto's character. It finishes Lauren's story. We had Cynthia's story. We had Abigail's story. Everything is tied up perfectly. But this epilogue kind of feels sequel baity to me. And honestly, I'm okay with sequel baiting as long as it's vague. Like the bit with the Cynthia taking care of someone and then Makoto getting a text from Abigail. Like that stuff is vague, right? It could go essentially anywhere. But concretely baiting us and telling us that Dorothy is still alive, that best girl other than Abigail is alive, is big. It's huge. We know how much Lauren loves her. Lauren is the great pretender, pretending that she's still around. And now that we know she's alive, I want to see her and Lauren come together. I want to see that happen in a season 2. But at the same time, going back to what I was saying about like someone catching the fall, our character falls, they get up, but then it turns out their fall never mattered. It turns out that the person they lost was there the whole time and they can be rescued. Like, there's a part of me that's like, yes, they're still alive. They're still alive, man. Go to them. But at the same time, there's another part of me that's like, wow, that is so cheap. You create a character, you make us care about this character, you have our character grow after losing someone, only to have them come back. Like that one scene with Lauren, he hears like a sound outside and he thinks it's her. He thinks she's come back. He runs outside, but it's just a cat, and she sounded kind of like a cat. Like Dorothy's voice kind of sounded like a cat, and everything just kind of, it hurt. Like that scene was just so powerful, but now like we keep that development, but at the same time she's still alive. Yeah, it feels kind of cheap, you know? It feels a little bit cheap. But anyways, let's give it some closing thoughts. I overall thought this show was really good. You know, I think I complained a lot, but that's just me. I like to complain. I really enjoyed Great Pretender. I think some of the middle arcs weren't so good. Snow of London definitely wasn't as good as Abigail's arc and the first arc. I'd say Snow of London probably ranks the lowest, and then you have Wizard of Far East is the best one. And then you have the first one with Kasano, and then from there you got the Abigail stuff, and then at the very bottom you have the Cynthia stuff. Which isn't to say that the Cynthia stuff was bad by any means. I don't know, maybe I just found it creepy that some old dude was hitting on my waifu, and it's like heavily implied that, you know, he felt up my waifu, and then from there it's like our main character Makoto like does something stupid and like tries to like redeem him, and they don't screw him over as hard as they should have, and he's like not okay with screwing someone over, but like the amount people have to sacrifice for his plan, like it's like heavily implied that Abigail had to sleep with this dude to like get him to trust her. It's wrong. Like it feels weird that Makoto isn't okay with doing some things, but he's okay with other people doing the dirty work. It seems like Makoto is so naive and he comes up with these plans so long as he isn't the one doing the dirty work. Really, what I'm saying is the problems I have with the Snow of London isn't with Cynthia per se, it's with Makoto. On another note, the first couple arcs are in my country now in dub format, and when I watched them, I could say that they're all right. Like, it was exactly what I expected. They played the Japanese dub at the beginning, and then they switched to English. I thought that was really nice. There's like a part of me that kind of hoped Lauren or the other people would have accents based on where they're from, but if they were con people, right, it doesn't make sense for them to have accents, so I guess that's fine. But I will say, though, Abigail's arc, I kind of expected the Ibrahim brothers to have like harsher accents, but they're like very soft spoken, if you ask me. Like they don't hit the same harshness that the Japanese dub hits. Once again, you know, going back to what Liu was saying about translations and how it can affect how you interpret the story. But overall, I think it's a pretty good translation. It stays pretty clear. Like the dialogue is very close to what they say in the Japanese version, but the delivery for some of the characters feels different to me, with the standout obviously being Sam Ibrahim. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about this show. I really enjoyed it. You should check it out, but I essentially spoiled the final arc. I actually don't know why you're watching this if you haven't seen the show. Let's do some channel update stuff. I did put out a really long summer 2020 anime season review, but it got, you know, shut down. It got manually taken down. I have no idea why. I guess I was using the trailer footage I was using was just no go, and they just randomly striked it down. So that's essentially dead. I guess for next time when I do like a really long a seasonal anime breakdown about all the shows I'm watching, I'll probably just have to throw some static PNGs on the background, because if I use trailer footage, they shoot me down. I'm not even using the sound. I'm being like striked by like the music stuff, but I'm not even using the music stuff, and they're manually striking me, manually taking me down. I really have no idea what's going on. It's just not working out right now. Anyways, thanks for watching. You know, if you made it this far, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys on the next one.